Thank you for joining us today on Positively Charged Biz. We are here to motivate, inspire, and support our listeners as they write their life stories. We are a proud founding member of the Real Disrupt Podcast Collaborative, and you can check out more awesome podcasts at realdisrupt.com.
You are having a positive and productive day. On today's show, we have a pleasure of being inspired and educated by Elizabeth Power. She is the CEO of ePower and Associates, and she is a sought-after speaker, facilitator, teacher, and consultant. ePower and Associates is the parent organization for ePower Change Institute and the Trauma Informed Academy. Elizabeth helps people with change, resilience, self-care, and alignment, and it's done from a trauma-informed perspective. She is going to share with us how to adapt to change and provide us with insights on hope and healing. I met Elizabeth when she appeared on my Thrive Thursday live show, and I knew that I had to hear more about her. So Elizabeth, on Positively Charged Biz, we like to start at the beginning. So can you tell us, why did you start ePower, and why did you decide to focus on resilience and adaptation?
Oh, this is so funny. Let me start with the very beginning. I moved to Nashville, Tennessee in 1979 as a shoe repairer. Okay.
Oh, so you fixed the soles.
Shoes. Go for the bad pun. I was soul saving. Bad pun's done. I did things like if you maybe you were a lady who had polio and your one calf was much smaller than the other, I would tailor your boots so that your boot tops actually fit you.
Wow.
Or I would turn pumps into slingbacks. That was a set for Tammy Wynette. She had some really beautiful pastel rainbow fabric pumps, and she wanted them to be slingbacks, so I did that. So I did all that real artsy costume theatrical work, which was lots of fun. But the shop closed because the guy didn't pay some of his taxes, bless his heart, and I went to work in what we used to call the welfare department, finding homes for foster kids and kids in need of adoption and helping those homes get ready and putting together the media marketing plan so that we could help more families know about special needs adoptions kids. And I did real well, but I got written up for being overproductive after 14 months. Now, first of all, I was freaked out. Why would you give me a job that you didn't think I could do in the time you'd set up to do it? I had so much to learn. I was such a baby back then. It was really funny. But the other thing was that I kept thinking, I can't learn all this knowledge that you have to learn about social work. There's a body of knowledge, or a BOK, about foster care, and a BOK about adoption, and a BOK about special needs, and a BOK about domestic violence, and a BOK about rape and sexual abuse, and a BOK. And I'm like going, this is too much. I'm losing my mind. Well, I might not have had much of one to lose to begin with in some ways, but I really thought there has to be something overarching all of this. And I sat down, probably feeling very sorry for myself back then. And it occurred to me that what all of these things have in common, and in fact the verb that we all deal with, is change.
Yeah.
If you think about your story about why you developed Thrive Thursday, it's change. When people come into people in your world, the mortgage world, I come to you because I'm financing or refinancing something and I want to change.
Yep.
You market to me because you want me to change to use your business. I go to the dentist because I need a change in my dental health. It is all, that's the one fundamental verb in everything. And I thought, well, I might be onto something here.
I think you are.
That was 1982. 1982, 40 years ago.
And the thing is in 1982, people were not as in tune to that change. They weren't aware of that change, and they didn't realize what change meant to them, right?
Right.
So set the stage. Tell us what's happening.
Well, so AT&T Information Services back then, it doesn't exist anymore, but they called me to ask me to come do some work with them after a major strike on some work on reconciliation from a change-based perspective. Because, again, when you think about what does change feel like, I mean, let's get really serious. Y'all might want to make a note here. Change feels awful unless you own it, you engineer it, and it goes exactly the way you planned. It usually feels really awful. And those people say, I love change. I challenge you to look at Are the changes that you love, that you feel happy and excited about, are they ones that you pick, or are they the ones imposed on you?
Right.
Okay, so the first thing is change doesn't feel good. It makes you feel stupid. It makes you angry. It makes you feel incompetent. Now think about some of your mortgage clients who get all puffed up like a, well, let's not go there, but they get all puffed up and upset. They may be showing you feelings related to change,
Yeah.
rather than anything that's real relative to the contract and the mortgage.
Because it's uncomfortable and they're not in control. Right?
Right. And they're accustomed to people who work with lots of numbers, shuffling numbers and taking advantage of them. They expect to be injured in the process. So these feelings of change are very powerful. Think about getting your very first job, getting fired. Oh, I know that's never happened to anybody but me. Getting married, getting divorced, finding out you're pregnant, finding out your adoption is going through, being diagnosed with COVID, recovering from COVID. Having to deal with all of the differences in how we're doing the holidays, all the differences in how we do things like walkthroughs and show houses in the real estate industry. Anything that involves people is going through tremendous change, and every single one of us is too. And it feels absolutely awful. And that's the thing to remember, that unless you find a framing for this that makes it easier, this is how it's going to feel. And let me tell you some framings that have helped me. The first one was, I love space, and I began to think about Zoom and all the Zoom meetings that we were having, and it occurred to me, if I had grandchildren, or if I had great-grandchildren, I'm a little young for that, but I suppose it could have happened, my great-grandchildren and maybe my grandchildren might be living off-planet, OFF, off-planet. They might be stationed on Mars. They might be stationed on the moon. They could be living somewhere besides this little blue spinning orb I call Earth. And so learning how to master this form of communication became much more important to me. And it's like, oh, well, okay, we're already talking about exploring and inhabiting Mars, so I can get on board with looking at this as a future thing. And the second thing was that as things really ground to a screeching halt, although grinding and screeching don't seem to go together, they really did in this one. I thought about what was life like before we got so very busy, before we got in the car and went somewhere, or popped in on people unexpectedly at any time of day or night, it seems, or were so totally available by every mechanism possible. I thought to myself, this might be a good reset. I don't like the economic injury it's caused to any of us. Don't get me wrong. But I have to tell you, I've been home more in 11 months than I was home in 5 years total.
Wow.
I like living in a still body. I like sleeping in my own bed. I like the place I've created for myself. And so looking for framing that makes it easier. Now, there are folks who are in relationships that are really tough, and it may be even harder because they are home. But wherever you are, if you can think about a framing that allows you to find something to enjoy, I find that the absence of all the Christmas music and all the Christmas carols, of which there's way too much in my opinion, or there was last year and the 30 years before that, that whole bombardment that began in October, I'm actually enjoying what I'm hearing of the holiday music because there's not so much of it. The fire hose has been removed. And so that's something that's helped me really begin to enjoy the time I'm having. I'm working just as hard, just as long, in my own home, in my own setup, but I'm having more fun.
Wow. So it's really our perspective. It's how we're looking at things, right? Is
A
that
lot
what
of it is. A lot of it. I mean, here's one of the things I've been saying for a very long time. You may not be able to choose the changes you face. You can choose how you see them and how you handle them. Most of the time. Most of the time.
Okay.
And we're not very good at that. So that's how it all got started. I've just been saying the same thing over and over till I've drunk my own Kool-Aid, and I've tested my Kool-Aid, and my Kool-Aid seems to be pretty good to people.
So what do you do when you work with companies? Like give me an idea of, how you would go to a company and assist them with handling change within their organizations.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd want to know what is the change. Is it a merger and acquisition? Is it a fundamental change in business process? Is it a sudden loss or gain? Is it bad publicity of some sort? because that's going to inform me about the kinds of things I might need to do. Now, if it's a company that's creating a change, like a public utility I once worked with creating their change management plan, I'm going to be looking for desired outcomes, stages in the process. I'll be following a fairly formalized change management plan. But whether it's any of those or all of those, I'm going to be talking to them about the human factor.
Right.
I'm going to be saying, let's get your people together and let's talk about what change is like and how they can handle it, so that they end up with some frames that make it easier for them to go through the change and thereby reduce the losses you may incur in productivity and profit because of the adjustments that have to happen. And I would craft very simply both a talent development and a coaching program that help the people at the bottom all the way to the people at the top be able to respond to this more effectively.
Well, that is so valuable. It absolutely is, because we all know, I mean, at every company, we always go through different changes, whether it's rolling out a new technology, whether it's introducing a new program, listen, I have to tell you, in my industry, I can think back of the day I decided I was no longer going to use paper. You know, back in the day, we used to have mortgage files, that were 10 years high.
Yeah.
And I decide, no more paper. We're going paperless. It was such a disaster that I literally had to pull the plug on it, regroup, and figure out another way to do it. Now, we did it all in the past, many years in the past, but I can remember it almost destroyed the company just trying to get rid of paper.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was the day a few years later when you went back to open an old file and the application wouldn't open it because it wasn't backwards compatible. Remember those? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. And ooh, don't get me started.
No, exactly. So I want to go back all the way back to 1979 when you were working, because I want to understand, you were working with some very traumatic situations at that time. I know that you look at things from a trauma-informed perspective. So what exactly does that mean to the layman's out here?
Okay, sure. I'd be happy to, and thank you. I really do look at things through a trauma-informed perspective. If you're talking about mental health care, it means looking at the latest evidence about the impact of what happens to us on who we become and how we behave and think and feel. For a long time, because of the medical model, the prevailing assumption is that those things that we call mental illnesses are somehow biological, and most of them actually are not. Now, you can't uncouple brain and body and mind. You can't really uncouple them. If I spend 30 years thinking about how awful my life is, I'm pretty sure going to be dealing with some depression and probably some post-traumatic stress. It may or may not be disorderly. But the bottom line is that we look at what happens to people as more significant than what's wrong with them. And we don't go down that diagnostic rabbit hole. There was a great article today I just sent around to my sister by a psychiatrist and some people who've been who are social anthropologists, who are looking at depression not as a biological medical model, but as how our mind and body are trying to save us. That almost always the dampening of affect that we call depression comes after traumatic experiences. And in childhood, if kids are in situations that they really can't do anything about, one of the most sensible things to do for survival is to hunker down, get small, and go slow.
Yeah. That's our animal instinct, right?
Exactly. It's what the brain does to help us survive, but it's not because our brain is sick or our hormones are sick. It's because our brain has one prime directive, and that is to survive and to keep the body alive. So when you look at the things that we learn to do, especially when we're young, that make sense when we're young, but maybe not when we're older, what we see is that there's an awful lot of impact of trauma that gets translated to mental illness. And when we look at it from a learning model instead, it's like, well, of course I didn't learn that I was responsible for anything except A, B, and C. That happened at this developmental point in my life when kids think they're responsible for everything. Oh, maybe I should revisit that. Oh, no wonder I go off like a bottle rocket at the drop of a pin. That was my body's been attuned to listen for sudden noises and to react. So I'm a little hair trigger in terms of reactions. Oh, that makes perfect sense. I had to listen for that when I was a kid. Of course, I don't like, people always thought I don't like dogs and kids. You know, it took me a while to unravel. I don't have any kneecaps. They took them out in the mid 70s. I've had a lot of knee surgery across here. Still have my own knee joints, but they don't have kneecaps. When I finally realized it's only because children and dogs are usually knee high and my knees have no protection
Huh.
that I don't dislike dogs and kids. They frighten me.
Right.
A whole different dynamic. So beginning to look at, I wonder what's happened that makes this make sense, instead of, I wonder what's wrong with, I wonder why women cry at work when they're frightened. Well, of course they do. That's one way to look like you're not a predator, or that you're not too strong or not too powerful.
Right. Yeah, no, makes sense. And what happens to us, Elizabeth, when we feel fear? What
Oh,
actually biologically happens to us?
more stuff than we've got time to talk about. But the first thing
Okay.
is the body says, "Oh my goodness, am I about to die?" You know, the
Right.
first thing is we go through that sudden, that moment of stilling or freezing, where we're going, "Okay, do I need to fight or take flight? Can I fight or take flight?" And if you know, think about a rabbit or a deer in the yard, it looks up and it's very still, and if it decides everything's okay, it goes back to eating.
Right.
If it decides something is that it needs to run or fight, it has to decide, can I do either of these things? An impala faced by or a lion or a jaguar or a cheetah that can outrun it will run until it's caught, and then it basically goes limp like a possum plays dead.
Huh.
Or you pass out when you have a blood draw, or you're paralyzed with fear. So the first thing is it goes through, do I need to do anything? And if it goes fight or flight, okay, I can fight this out. I'm big enough, tall enough, old enough, have the abilities. I might be able to win here. Or I can successfully run. Okay, and they do that. If those two options aren't available, if fight or flight are not available, I'm 5 feet tall with really crummy knees. I'm not exactly a candidate for winning a bar fight. Then you have two choices, and this depends on age and ability in some ways. One is immobility, that paralysis or fainting thing.
Right.
The other is dissociation, which is a really primitive defense mechanism that we develop around 1.5 to 2. And if we don't have to use it, it kind of goes on its merry way. If we need to use it and it gets stronger and stronger, it can become sort of problematic in adulthood.
Right.
And that means disconnecting from what you feel or what you experience in your body or what you know or your behavior or your emotions.
Right. And do you even, okay, so fear of survival is one thing,
Uh-huh.
but then fear of being hurt even emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
the whole nother thing, right?
Your brain doesn't process it any differently.
So we view it exactly the same. And it's interesting to me. Like, I always am curious why some people give up on their dreams, or some people give up on something that they know they want and they're going for it, but yet at some point they run the other direction. And maybe that ties in a little bit, right? Does that tie in somewhat?
Oh, it does.
Why?
I mean,
So why
it's a
does
se-
that happen?
I call it the success set point,
Okay.
because we can't go any farther than that until we readjust it. There are a lot of reasons that happens. One is maybe somebody has a real concern about doing better than their ancestors did.
Mm-hmm.
If you were a person who immigrated and you taught yourself English and you wanted to get a high school diploma, a GED, what if that would be more education than anybody else in your family would have? Might you be ostracized or excluded? You could. So there has to be enough reasonable sense of, I will still be an acceptable human being to the people I care about for you to take an action.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I read an unbelievable article in the Harvard Business Review just this last weekend. And it was about, obviously we all want to be more aware of diversity, right? So it's been a very big topic this past year. But this article was about socioeconomic diversity. And it kind of ties into what you just said. So they're saying that regardless of gender, ethnicity, people, that is kind of this hidden trend where people that grow up in a low income household or a household with challenges, they have that cap, just what you were saying.
Yeah.
That as leaders, we have to recognize those people and pull them forward, because they will not actually put themselves out in front to go for the higher position or for expectation of more. So go ahead. What are your thoughts on that?
They might or they might not. There's a tremendously powerful trend right now when we talk about diversity, I want to talk first of all about communities of color in this country. Because historically, and I could talk about Native Americans and people with disabilities and people who are sexual minorities and people who are neurodiverse, and we need to talk about all of us. But I want to talk first of all about that community. There's now a number among a number of the women that I hang out with who are my coaches or who are in coaching groups I'm in who are women of color, talking about making their ceiling their children's floor. And
there you go.
There's a tremendous amount of mindset work that goes on to help people change that set point. You cannot do it for them. If you brought me forward to $175,000 and my set point's $100,000, you could bring me forward all you wanted to and it wouldn't really make much difference. I would figure out how to sabotage it. That's an inside game.
That is so interesting.
That's an inside game. It has to change in here. And it's not just working harder. Sometimes it's working less.
Right.
Sometimes it's wrestling with how you value yourself. Sometimes it's wrestling with habits in your shop that you need to change and how you value yourself. And that's all the work of deep change, because let me go to the next part of what I teach, which will give you an understanding of why this is so important. If you think about that old four square clothes, and on the top it's got for and against, and on the bottom it's got for and against. Yep. If on top that are the benefits of failure, when I'm in failure, when I've hurt my knee, or when some old so-and-so's hit my car, or I'm divorcing some old so-and-so, or somebody in my family's died, there is a very steady dose of sympathy, pity, comfort, and attention that comes my way. And those are the positive benefits of failure. If as children we grow up, or if by whatever process we grow up with a strong attachment to those benefits, we can't afford to succeed, because we'll have to let go of the pity, the sympathy, the comfort, and the attention that we get from our failures. If we let go of that, we're in change automatically. If we're in change, we've got to recognize that to go from those benefits to this. Let me talk about the negative benefits of failure. You lose your self-respect. The years and the times that I was living out of my car or couch surfing or plain out and out homeless were very embarrassing to me off and on. What was wrong with me that I couldn't keep my money stuff together to be able to avoid that? And in reality, it's probably what happened to me that helped me not learn the mathematical stuff I would have benefited from. And I know exactly where it stopped in the 4th grade. Know exactly. Public shaming stopped me from learning those things. So if I'm going to get past the sympathy and the pity and the comfort and the attention that make me feel good, to get the self-respect, the self-esteem, the access that comes with a right use of power and success, I have to go through change, and it feels awful.
Right.
That's the loop we get stuck in.
Wow. That is so interesting. You wouldn't think that anyone would want to have those feelings, but you're right. If you've gone through that, that's when you get the attention. That's when people are coming to you and calling you and connecting with you and reaching out. That's when you feel supported. You're going to constantly look for that. So, wow, that is absolutely fascinating.
That's why it's so lonely at the top, if you think about it. I mean, for when you finally get accustomed to self-respect and self-esteem and having some access and doing the things you want to do, the people that were your friends before who are still stuck in being victims, they won't come. If you've ever lost a lot of weight and kept it off, what happened to the people that you used to hang out with that weighed about as much as you did? They didn't stick around. If you have a physical disability or a psychological disability and you figure out how to overcome it and fit in and function, people don't know what to do with you.
Wow. All right. So I do want to approach the lonely at the top. Okay. Because I have lots of wonderful, successful women that are in my industry that are going to listen to this. And I can appreciate what you're saying and totally relate to it. So I understand. But I'd like to know, what can we do as women being there to support other women to continue to support each other up? Because again, as you're speaking, my mind is thinking of some of the, I can totally relate to that, but tell us what we can do to kind of change that thinking?
Well,
Because there has to be, I know you have the answer there, Elizabeth. You've got
several
some exercise for us, so please share that.
The first thing is, and this is so hard and so easy at the same time. It's called radical acceptance.
Okay.
When we assume that everybody's doing the best that they can, it changes a whole lot, because that includes us. If I don't assume that I'm doing the best I can, it's hard to assume that you're doing the best you can. But I want to ask you a question. When's the last time you woke up and thought, ooh, 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 oh, I've got a closing today. Oh, I'm going to make them so miserable at that closing. Yeah, ooh, they made me mad in the process. So I'm going to really chap them up and piss them off, right? When's the last time you did that?
Never.
Bingo. If you don't, why do you think other people do?
Right.
Okay, so level that playing field, because that makes it easier to say, okay, how do I want to change my different? If you're always using a vertical structure of better, worse, good, bad, right, wrong, it's hard to change that structure. So flip it to different. What do I want to do different about that?
Okay.
And then suddenly you're not competing with your girlfriends, because I will tell you, one of the hardest things about being an older woman is there comes a point in life when it seems like we are all competing with each other for something none of us really want.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave that alone right where it is. Figuring out how to support each other as women means recognizing every one of us comes in not only with whatever generic entitlement our race allows us to have, we come in with generic disenfranchisement that our gender affords us. We also add the disenfranchisement of color or disability or difference, and we have more in common on the areas where we struggle than the areas where we succeed.
Makes sense.
So being kind to each other, and instead of there are two approaches that people take. They either overlook all the, I can't do this, I don't know what to do, I think I'm failing. They either totally write it off and overlook it, thereby enabling people to stay stuck in the cycle. Or they say, yeah, I understand you feel that way, and 90% of the people that aren't hospitalized for something would feel that way. Now let's see what we can do with it. Let me know when you're ready to move beyond that. You need to acknowledge the feeling of it's easier to stay stuck than it is to go forward, and say, well, when am I ready to try to move beyond this? I've been working on one thing for a year, getting ready to move beyond it. I just finally think I found the key about 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And
So how
it was,
did you do that? How did you go through that process?
well, the first thing I did was I spent last January looking at what is the one thing that gets in the way of me achieving my dreams the most. And it's the difficulties I've had with math.
Okay.
And I believe I have dyscalculia, or I believed I had dyscalculia, which means the numbers switch but the letters don't.
Okay.
Because I was always messing things up with my money. I was reading the greater and less than signs backwards, for example. That'll really hurt you. Don't ask me what I can do on a tip. And I had basically just given up and said, I have dyscalculia. I can't read numbers. You can't expect me to do, listen to what comes after that. You can't expect me to do well because of this disability. Let me roll over and show you my belly and show you that I'm not a threat with this. Great. But I never made progress in advancing my company this year. The progress that I knew I could make, should make, wanted to make, and think I'm basically have a right to make, because I'm as entitled to being able to do well as anybody else is. Doesn't matter what's happened to me in the past. And I woke up after a long, arduous year of coaching, listening to a lot of mindset work and learning some sales techniques and looking at where my pattern of stopping was. Where did I quit? And it was always when it came to the spreadsheets. And my VA said to me, I think you probably read numbers really well. There's something going on, because you have a vision in your head of a chart, and you've got all the numbers and you've got the calculations, and they're done and they're right. But when it gets to paper, you don't do so well. It's like crack. And then I woke up in the middle of the night thinking, I've been lying to myself all these years to stay safe, because I couldn't have gotten my Six Sigma Black Belt certification if I couldn't read numbers, even though I used a lot of matchsticks. I couldn't have written a paper in college to clip out of mathematics on the relationship between the Fibonacci formula and Pascal's triangle as evidence of determinism in nature.
No, I would say you couldn't.
You know, I mean, I've been lying to myself all these years. I wonder how that's helped me. Right. There was my question. I wonder how it has helped me to not be able to do numbers. I've already answered it. I grew up extremely bright. There's no doubt about that. but I thought I was stupid, and being stupid allowed me to participate with people in relationships that were real and meaningful. I wasn't as frightening because I'm so smart.
Right.
I remember years of uglying up where my only outfits were really awful t-shirts and shorts, and let's not talk about personal hygiene or how I took care of myself. I cut my own hair, I picked my own glasses. I worked hard to be ugly because I didn't want to be too attractive, which makes me safer. I worked hard to be stupid about math because it keeps me safer.
Wow.
Now, let's not talk about all the risky things I've done, but I'll bet every single one of your people who's listening and who listens in the future can find something they've done to be less of who they are to make it easier for other people.
I have to tell you, Elizabeth, this past year, I have been absolutely blessed to be part, really involved in the women within the mortgage industry. And time again, we hear of us actually, I'll use the words I hear all the time, toning ourselves down, whatever that means. Whether it's what you said, right? Not coming across as educated, not looking a certain way because they don't feel people will find them as being smart if they look a certain way, or the way they speak, whatever it is. I've heard over and over, you better tone it down.
Oh, yes. Children should be seen and not heard. There are all kinds of social messages. But I want to say to you, whether, if you look at being a woman alone gives you that disease.
Yeah.
If you are a woman of color, you get that disease doubly. I mean, my friends who are people of color, if they have gallbladder attacks, they don't go to the emergency room without dressing up, putting on their makeup, and they still know they're going to get asked if they're using drugs.
Oh.
As an older person, I know because my hair is pretty white. When I go, there are assumptions that will be made about me because of my age.
Right.
So we're always combating not only the ordinary things that might come with culture. We're always wrestling down this piece of gender stuff.
Yeah.
About when and how do we ever get to show up for who we really are. And let me tell you, the minute that I made the decision that I was going to advance that cause in my life, things began to open up in my business.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you when we were doing Thrive Thursday, but my story is that I was the workhorse in the mortgage industry. Literally, no one could outwork me. Okay, I worked harder than any man, female, didn't matter. Until 2018, when my business started to struggle because we were in a downturn, and I got up on a stage for the first time. And when I got up on the stage for the first time, I realized that the women of the industry needed someone that could open their voice and be able to have others listen, because I was in a position that it was acceptable to my industry to be an owner of a national mortgage company, that it was okay if I shared my voice, because the world perceived that as, oh, it's okay to listen to her, where there may be many other women that maybe have better views or stronger views or smarter about a topic, but my image was what was acceptable to share that. And I owned that, to say, if I'm going to be the messenger to at least be able to open this up, then I will take that role on.
Yeah.
Correct. It's all what, and I equated so much of this year with the whole mask, where I feel it's what mask is acceptable for someone to be okay with viewing.
Right, exactly. And you got to think about that, because people of color, people who are sexual minorities, people with disabilities, the entire population of people who are stigmatized, which is what diversity should really be about, not just people of color. If we level it for people of color but don't pay attention to the other places where we've got these disenfranchisements, we aren't really making any progress. But when you think about that, you really begin to see that we all have to have certain masks. If you are someone diagnosed with PTSD, as I once was, people expect you to look and act a certain way. And if you can't meet their mask of pleasant, friendly all the time, something might happen.
Right.
Okay, so why? Because it behooves us to keep fear in place. We want to keep fear in place so that maybe nothing negative will happen to us. And what we're uncertain about is how to use the model of how we teach ourselves and how we help ourselves learn to mitigate that. It's been fascinating. I love walking people through the coaching process to help them take these simple insights deeper and reframe and rechange and change their lives as a result.
Well, I guess the good news, Elizabeth, is that it is possible.
Oh yeah.
And
here.
That's the glory of what we're speaking about. That there is an opportunity to live up to your greatest potential and to be happy in doing so.
Right, and expanding.
Expanding. And I love that limiting belief. Like, take the limits off. There is no limiting belief, right? All right, so before we wrap up, to tell everyone how they can get in touch with you and learn more about all of these this is a great discussion, so thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Have to mention one thing, because when I was checking out your website and viewing a few things.
Oh, here we go.
I saw a video that I have to tell you that I was sitting there laughing, and you tell me a little bit about what is the value of laughter?
Oh, it's huge, and I use it no matter whether I'm working on change, resilience, or alignment, or trauma-informed care. Here's the thing. We could all laugh a whole lot more, and you can laugh at absolutely nothing. I'm fixed to show you that. Just watch and see if I don't. Laughter increases the endorphins, so it's like a natural high. It also increases the flexibility of the carotid arteries. You want that as you age. The more flexible they are, the more brain still goes to your brain. And it also perks your face up, and it just makes you feel so good. Now, I'm just going to show you how easy it is to laugh at nothing. Watch out. Here we go. You'll have to get me down off the ledge after this. Got you doing it too, didn't I?
I absolutely love that. And that is the perfect way for us to end, as you tell everyone how they can find you, how they connect with you, and of course, everything that you can offer.
You're so kind. Thank you so much. If you think that I'm the person you want to work with, the first thing you ought to do is go out to elizabethpower.com. I put it in the chat box, elizabethpower.com. And look around. When you click on apply or contact us, you'll go right out to the change readiness form. You'll be able to see all the way through the process what people are saying about the work we've been doing and what we offer, which is a combination of coaching, training, and events based on the topic of change, resilience, and trauma.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. This has absolutely been amazing. Thank you for joining us. And everyone, check out Elizabeth Power. She is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Positively Charged Biz. I'm Laura Brandeo, and we are here to motivate, inspire, and support our listeners as they write their life stories. If you have an inspiring story, please email me at laura@positivelycharged.biz. And remember to subscribe to hear more great guests. And connect to us on Facebook at Positively Charged and Instagram at Positively Charged Podcast. Until next time, we wish you a positive day.